Following on from part 6, I have some more night testing video. I do have a lot of daytime footage and a very thorough evaluation coming up. But for now, I think this is a really cool video to show off. It was in fact -8 when I recorded this, which is the coldest I've ever been out in with any of these models, and at least I wasn't worried about overheating the motors for once. I was in fact having concerns with cooling down the batteries too much. I'll drop in a few photos of these locations in the daytime. It just gives a little bit better context of the terrain. I know I said that in the last one and I hardly did it, but this time I will. I'm going to basically repeat my comments from the last part. I really liked the way this model performed, especially since I'd had a bit more practice by the time I got to these test sessions. A bit more varied terrain as well, nice mixture of quite flat and smooth to rough and steep. But again, it was build quality and durability wasn't so great. I was having little failures here and there. It could be, glued and taped back together in the field, but there comes a point where you just accept you've built it too flimsy. Although, without going off on a massive tangent, the foam that I used for this I have previously recommended, ProBoard, ProWarm or something like that. It's not fantastic, but it is actually available, which is more than I can say for Depron. However, I found the most recent batch of the orange foam that I bought, which is what this model is made out of, it claims to be the same material. It isn't. I don't know if it's a bad batch or just there's been a change in manufacturing process or whatever, but the orange foam, this stuff, it's terrible. Very brittle, very weak. Not even easy to put back together. It was just awful. So, although parts of the model did need actual reinforcement, I felt like I was on, I think the phrase is, a highway to nothing, which is where the material itself is so bad that trying to reinforce it means building an entirely new model out of better stuff, which is what I've now done. One of my motivations for using the orange stuff when the grey foam I know is perfectly good is it showed up better on camera when I was doing my build log and marking out lines. It's just a bit nicer to film. And the previous ProWarm stuff was adequate. But yeah, if I've convinced anybody to go and buy it, and you're having trouble with it being very brittle and weak, then I do apologise, but there's definitely something going on with the supply there. It's not the same material that it used to be. But on a more positive note, I am very happy with the performance here. Again, following on from past video, and it will be elaborated on, maximum hover height's really, really good. Although I didn't use it very much because it just wasn't necessary, but it's good to know you can punch a lot of power and get a very high air cushion if you need it. Although it spent most of its time at mid-power level, or sometimes even quite low on the smoother ground. Forward propulsion was always a problem before I had the sub-flap and the booster motors, definitely solved here. And I get the best results when it's a joint effort between the booster and the flap. Very low speed, just use the rear flap, but for higher speed or more thrust, it's not a case of just punch the booster and leave the flap alone. You want to get them working together. Typically open up the rear flap, activate the booster, and you can use the rear flap as a sort of elevator. Took quite some getting used to, but once I'd tamed it, I could get a lot of speed out of it and keep it pitch stable. Manoeuvrability is very good with the side flaps. It's really handy that you can actually just go directly sideways, so if you're in a tight spot, you don't have to spin around, you can essentially just thrust straight out of it sideways. Reverse thrust, not so good, but functional, enough to be useful.